we're going to start now. Dumping, a form of international price discrimination, occurs when foreign buyers are charged lower prices than domestic buyers for the same product. Also, selling in foreign markets at a price below cost of production. So first, you have to understand what dumping is. Dumping is like foreign exporters or producers dump their products in this country at a lower price than sold in their own country, or lower cost than production. Take for example, just for the sake of example only, Korea dumps automobile cars into Malaysia, selling a Hyundai lower than the price in Korea, selling it in Malaysia lower than the price in Korea, or lower than the cost of producing the Hyundai in Korea, selling it in Malaysia at lower cost or lower prices, lower cost of production or in Korea, or lower cost, that's lower prices than sold in Korea. That's dumping. For the sake of example only, not true. So, now, forms of dumping. Sporadic dumping. A firm disposes of excess inventories. They have a lot of inventories in their warehouse. They sell it at price below what is being sold in their own country. Sell it here in Malaysia, because to finish up their inventories. That's sporadic dumping that happen sometimes. Sporadic. Next, predatory dumping. What is predator? Animal predator, to kill another animal. Okay. In this case, we're talking about companies, firms, products. Predatory dumping produces temporarily reduces price charge abroad to drive foreign competitors out of business. Number 3, persistent dumping. What is persistent? Keep going and going and going. Persistent. Goes on indefinitely to maximize economic profits. A producer may consistently sell abroad at a lower price than at home. So, dumping is a international price discrimination. Dumping is a form of price discrimination internationally. Producer charges more than at home with less competition and more overseas to compete. Submarkets demand conditions must differ. Different demand elasticities, home and foreign. Firm must be able to separate submarkets, prevent arbitrage, which is the resale of goods at a higher price. Markets easier to separate internationally because of high transportation cost, and there's also trade barriers. So this is the picture, and we have a submarket here. This is South Korea, Canada, and total market. So here South Korea is less elastic submarket. Canada more elastic submarket. The quantity change is bigger, more elastic. So a price discriminating, okay, firm maximize profits by equating marginal revenue in each submarket with its marginal cost. The firm will charge at a higher price in less elastic demand, which is less competitive market, and a lower price in the more elastic demand, more competitive market. Successful dumping leads to additional revenue and profits for the firm compared to what would be realized in the absence of dumping. So South Korea, less elastic. Canada, elastic market. This submarket. Total market, we add that horizontally from both South Korea and Canada markets. Total market. Korean firms maximize profit producing or selling 45, which is marginal cost equals to marginal revenue. This is marginal cost and marginal revenue at this intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue. So selling 45, which is this is production here, marginal cost and marginal revenue. Selling 45, marginal cost. This is total market, marginal cost and marginal revenue. Selling 45 at the price of 500. This is the demand of both total market. So at marginal revenue and marginal cost. So 45 at the price of this 500. Wait a minute. Well, okay. I skipped, sorry. I skipped my, okay. Let me go back. South Korea, less elastic. Canada, elastic. Total market, we add horizontally both South Korea and Canada markets. Korean firms maximize profits selling 45. Marginal cost equals to marginal revenue. Selling 45. Average total cost is at 300. This average total cost at 300. Total cost 300 times 45, which is 13,500. Okay. In a non-discriminating situation, non-dumping situation, Korean firm sell 45 at 500. Sells 45 at 500. Optimal output where horizontal is where the horizontal line intersects demand schedule at 500. Where the horizontal line intersects demand schedule. There's a demand schedule, it's 500. sells 35 to Koreans. Yeah. Oh. Sells to 35 to Korean. Yeah, 500. This is the demand schedule in South Korea. So we move here because the demand schedule in South Korea. So sell 35 units to Koreans and 10 to Canadian, because selling total is 45, so 10 to Canadians. So we have 700, 1700 plus 17,500 plus 5,000. So and then the profit is 17,000 plus 5,000 minus total cost of 13,500. You get the 9,000 total profit. Now, with price discrimination, charge higher prices to Korean buyers, which is less elastic, and lower prices, so dumping to the Canadian market, more elastic without additional cost. At marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and where horizontal line intersects marginal revenue schedule in each sub-market, sell 25 to Koreans at 700, 25 to Korea 700, more expensive in the country, and sell 20 to Canada at 400. Sell 20 to Canada at 400. So total profit now 17,500 plus 8,000 minus total cost, just 13,500, and the profit now is higher at 12,000, greater than before. So dumping is a form of price discrimination, allows a country, a producer, makes higher profit by selling overseas at a lower price or a lower cost than sold in domestic market. So dumping is one of the actions. Always, if you read the news, complaints to WTO, another country is dumping to another country, they will complain that to WTO, and there's a regulation of anti-dumping regulations at WTO. So levy of tariffs will be levied to compensate for the anti-dumping action by one country by another. So that's what we call anti-dumping duty, levied when, in this case, this slide, the US centric slide, when the US government, this US Department of Commerce, determines foreign merchandise being sold at less than fair value in the US, and when US International Trade Commission determines that less than fair value imports are causing or threatening material injury. That's the word, material injury to domestic industry. So starting with the US Department of Commerce and then the US International Trade Commission, so anti-dumping duties imposed in addition to the normal tariff. So how much is it? So amount by which foreign market value exceeds US price. That amount, that's the margin of dumping. You see, lower prices in the US, foreign producers dump their products in the US at a lower price or lower cost than in their own country. So by how much that anti-dumping duty will be levied, by that amount. That's what we call margin of dumping, amount by which foreign market value exceeds US price. What would be in their own country the product, the price of the product compared with what's been sold in the US, that margin. Foreign market value, there are two definitions how to determine the amount of margin of dumping. Price based on definition. So now, to determine that margin, how much is it in foreign market? So price based definition, dumping occurs when foreign firms sell goods at a price in the US below home price. So two ways, I keep mentioning price or cost. So price based on the price. How much the difference between the price sold in the US compared to the price would have been sold in their own country. Please request again. I want to accept. Please, someone who wants to join, please request again. Okay, I'm back. Two definitions. One is based on price, second based on cost based. Used when price based definition cannot be applied. So this is how to calculate cost of manufacturing merchandise plus general expenses, at least 10% of cost of manufacturing, plus profit on home market sales, at least 8% of manufacturing cost, plus general expenses, plus packaging merchandise for shipment in the United States. So this, if the product is coming from Korea, dumping into the US, the cost base will be trying to find out the cost of manufacturing that merchandise in Korea plus general expenses, at least 10% of that cost of manufacturing. So the cost is for a unit of car, okay, the cost, let's say 10,000. So plus 10% of that 10,000 for general expenses plus the profits in Korea, at least 8% of that total merchandise cost plus expenses, and then packaging merchandise for shipment. So all this calculated to find the cost of producing that product in the US, in Korea, and if the total cost would be 15,000, or being sold in the US for 10,000 only, and 5,000 would be the margin. Anti-dumping duty, the margin of dumping 5,000. Cost 10,000, 15,000. I make it a story, not true. 15,000 the cost, but sold in the US, in Korea 15,000, but sold in the US at 10,000. So 5,000 is the margin of dumping based on cost. When there is not possible to find the price, so we'll go for the cost definition or approach. So a margin of dumping, two ways to calculate that, based on price or based on cost. So this Whirlpool get anti-dumping tariff. There's a story here. Whirlpool agitates for anti-dumping tariffs on clothes washes, 93,000 employees, 21 billion in annual sales, and 70 manufacturing and technology research centers throughout the world. In 2017-2011, Whirlpool filed anti-dumping and anti-subsidy petitions against Samsung and LG, which it contended were selling in the US at prices lower than fair value. 2016, Whirlpool filed again. 2017, U.S. Trade Commission approved Whirlpool's petition for safeguard protection. And okay, more story here, which is VP Furniture and other U.S. furniture manufacturers over opposition of many U.S. furniture retailers filed anti-dumping complaint against China. 2005, U.S. government imposed dumping duties on most of Chinese furniture shipped to the US, resulting in a decrease in Chinese furniture sold in the United States. However, imports from Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries filled in the vacuum. Return VB Furniture is to profitability is now largest wood bedroom manufacturers in the United States. So, is it fair to do this anti-dumping duty? Supporters claim that such laws needed to ensure level playing field to be fair by offsetting artificial sources of competitive advantage. Competitive because selling at lower price or lower cost then would have been sold. Then sold in their own domestic, in their own country. That's dumping. So critics note that although protected industries gain, consumers lose more, and economy as a whole therefore suffers net loss. should average variable cost be the yardstick for defining dumping? Economists argue that fair value should be based on average variable cost rather than average total cost, especially when domestic economy experiences downturns in demand. Under competitive conditions, firms price goods at average variable cost. Anti-dumping laws punish competitive behavior. US firms selling at home not subject to the same rules. So here, home sale, no dumping, 100 units at 300. Export sales, 0 unit at 300. Sales revenue 30,000, less variable cost 200 per unit. 10,000 and less total fixed cost and profit is 0. With dumping, 100 units at 300 home sales, export sales 50 units at 250, sales revenue 42,000, less variable cost of 200 per unit, less total fixed cost of profit is 2,500 with dumping. So this is should be the margin. Should anti-dumping law reflect currency fluctuations? Fluctuations in exchange rate can cause a foreign producer to dump, according to legal definition. So-called dump here because of exchange rate. Are anti-dumping duties overused? Okay, this one you understand? It is because of exchange rate. Suddenly, exchange rate changed and the products becomes cheaper. The Korean products becomes cheaper in the US. When Korean won devalues, reduction in value of Korean won, so Korean products becomes cheaper suddenly. So sort of dumping, but it's not really dumping. It is because actually exchange rate. Should that anti-dumping law reflect that currency fluctuation? Are anti-dumping duties overused? Now, nations small and large bring anti-dumping cases leading to retaliation. In many cases where imports were determined to be dumped, they would not have been questioned under the same country's antitrust law. One second, people want to join. Please request again to join. Now, nations, small and large, bring anti-dumping cases to WTO, leading to retaliation. In many cases where imports were determined to be dumped, they would not have been questioned under the same country's antitrust law. All this while, the antitrust law, which is the competition policy, antitrust law in the US, in other countries, is called anti-monopoly, or the laws or regulation and policy to ensure competitive market. There's antitrust law, anti-monopoly law, antitrust in the US. The name, to ensure competition. There's antitrust law. Government procurement policy, so done with the anti-dumping. So we have non-tariff barriers, quota, 1, domestic content requirement, 2, yesterday, subsidies, which is production subsidy, 3, export subsidy, 4, dumping, 5. Now, other non-tariff barriers. Government procurement policies by American, for example, 1933 Buy American Act requires federal agencies to purchase materials and products from the US suppliers if prices not unreasonably higher than the foreign supplier. Domestic product must have 50% domestic content and be manufactured in the US. This is example of government procurement policy. So we have 6 other non-tariff barriers. One second, I've got 3. Government procurement policy that 1933 Buy American Act. U.S. suppliers of civilian agencies preference over foreign firms, 6 to 12% preference margin, 50% preference margin for Department of Defense preferences waived if United States produced goods is not available in sufficient quantities or is not of satisfactory quality. Before we go beyond this, I want to mention to you that other non-tariff barriers can be summed today as a new non-tariff barriers, so-called new, trying to make a connection between the opening of a market with non-trade issues. Number one, making a connection between trade opening, whether higher tariff or not, with human rights. Human rights is considered non-trade issues. Number two, technical standards. It's a way of protecting a domestic industry. For example, regulations of catalytic converter to reduce smoke coming out from the exhaust for a car. So Department of Transport in the United States imposed that. It's a way of blocking other countries' car to enter the US market by putting in technical standards. You must have this, the technical, like this amount of smoke only can come out from the exhaust, and using technical standard, you must have this. U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, Department of Agriculture, also using technical standards, must pass this test in order to enter U.S. market. So using technical standards. Number two, I'm not referring to any slide. I'm just from my own mouth. Number one, I mentioned human rights. Use human rights as a cover, so-called cover. I say cover as a tactic to impose higher tariff to other countries. Number two, using that technical standard. Number three, child labor. Number four, democracy. You're not democratic enough. You have dictators, your country. So using all these non-trade issues, and others. Yeah, environmental, human rights, technical standards, child labor. Child labor, in the past, that was in 1980s, okay? United States accused Indonesia at that time of using child labor. It's not fair competition because labor, you don't pay normal salary, very low wages, and that's why the products were cheaper. So United States accused Indonesia of using child labor and slapped Indonesia with a high tariffs on that particular items, shirt or shoes. And with China, United States claimed that China were using labor from prisons to manufacture goods and sell these goods in the US. The labor from prisons, you either don't pay them or pay them little wages. So for the US, this is not fair. The competition, you're selling the products in the US at cheaper price because you are using laborers from prisons. So using all this to do protection for the domestic firms, using human rights, child labor, labor issues. Just now, child or prison, labor issues of the human rights, labor issues, technical standards. Number 4, I mentioned. Next is environment. Using environment, all these are non-trade issues as a way of protection. In the European countries, in the EU, European Union countries, that's what we call eco labeling, labels. So woods already processed, woods hanged or displayed at a hardware shop in EU, attached to that wood a label, tropical wood. That label, tropical wood, that labeling, we call it eco labeling, a way of using that label as a way to protect domestic producer of woods in Europe, because the consumers in the EU are more educated when it comes to protecting the environment. When they see that label attached to the wood being displayed at a hardware store, hardware shop, they will, that's tropical wood. They know, orang utan. So these are being played in the European Union countries, in the EU, played. When you see tropical wood, they associate that with orang utan being displaced. No more orang utan, extinct because of felling of woods, because of the timber industry that fell so many trees, and orang utan have no place to live, or their areas are being decimated. So they stop buying. They don't buy the woods because of environmental protection. They claim that this wood, tropical woods, are associated with heavy timber exploration. Timber what? Felling of timbers and damaging environments. So they want to protect. They love. They are educated on environmental protection, and so with the labels, they don't buy that product coming from the tropical countries. So that label serves as a way to protect domestic producers from foreign competition. So that's what we call eco labeling. connecting market openings with environmental protection. Another one, yes, 5, 6, democracy. Using democracy or not as a way of putting up barriers to trade, higher tariff to those countries are not really democratic. So that was without the slides here. So let's go through the slide again. What the slide says. Number 1 is government procurement policy which discriminate foreign products. That's number 1. Other non-tariff barriers. Social regulations correct a variety of undesirable side effects of markets. Here, what I say here, health, safety, and environment. Just now, eco-labeling. Health, yes, using health issue as a way of stopping products from coming to a country as a protection. And safety, just now, technical standards. What is CAFE standards? Corporate average fuel economy standard. Using environment, less smoke. Corporate average fuel economy standards. Passenger cars, 37.8 miles per gallon, 2016. Light truck, 28.8 miles per gallon. This is the standards used as a protection. So in order to enter the US market, a car must not go below this. For example, 30 miles only per gallon. US until today continues to use non-metric gallons, inches, miles until today. Most of other countries use the metric system. So if a car from Malaysia can go only 30 miles for a gallon, so Malaysia's car cannot enter US market. There's a way of protection against Malaysian's car. I'm just making a story, okay? Not true. Europe has a cow of hormone-treated US beef, ban on hormone-treated meat. Other non-tariff barriers. The last slide. Sea transport and freight regulations. US shipping companies serving Japanese ports complained of highly restrictive system of ports in Japan, required to clear every detail of visits with Japan's Stevedore Company Association. Dock workers available only 18 hours a day or less, made US goods more expensive in Japan. So, regulations regarding the transport, sea transport, is also a way of protection. US companies find it not easy to enter Japan because of the regulations Japan's having. In 1997, US and Japan, on the brink of a trade war, reach an agreement to liberalize port services in Japan. This is my own addition. I added what I said just now. I'm not happy with the slide, original slide. I added my own. Yes, what I spoke earlier. New non-tariff barriers. After all that, government procurement policy, the new one. So what I mentioned, the 5, environment. Example, eco-labeling in EU of tropical woods. Oh, when people in the EU see the label tropical wood, orangutan. No more orangutan because they are felling lots of trees. I don't want to buy that. That's a way of protection. Barriers to trade. Labor standards. Example, child labor and labor from prison and slapping tariff on Indonesia and China accused of using labor from prison. Technical standards. Example, catalytic converter to reduce smoke from car exhaust. Health and safety. U.S. Department of Agriculture. Products must have this USDA approved. There's like a sticker or chopped USDA approved. Human rights, yes, including number 6. If I can put that together, number 5 and number 6 together, which is democracy, human rights and democracy. Using all this non-trade issue as a way to put up trade barriers or protection. So we're done with that. So what we learned in this chapter tonight: dumping is a international price discrimination, and because of dumping, the countries, the firms that are dumping make profit. And to correct that, there's anti-dumping duty levied by the same amount, which is we call margin of dumping, to determine that either price, based on price, or based on cost. Is anti-dumping duty, anti-dumping law unfair? So the critics here, the supporters claim such laws needed to ensure level playing field. And critics note that although protected industries gain, consumers lose more, and economy as a whole therefore suffers net loss. We're not responsible for the graph here, even the slides don't put the graph here, because in another book that I use there's a graph. Yes, coming up in the next chapter, that countervailing duty. Countervailing, we're going to study. Yes, there should be a graph in the next chapter. So we finish with this one. And non-trade issues. Very important word I use here. Non-trade issues. Tying. I said connecting. This is my own word. I lost it. What I typed. Tying. To tie trade policy to non-trade issues. These are non-trade: environment, labor standard, technical standard, health and safety, human rights and democracy. So done. We're gonna get to the next chapter. Okay, now after we're done with tariff and non-tariff barriers, so imagine this. Chapter 4, we dealt with shukri. Chapter 5, non-shukris. Shukri, chapter 4. Chapter 5, non-shukris. Many other. So now, chapter 6, trade regulations in relation with the industrial policies in the developed countries. And chapter 7 will be developing countries. And this is what we're gonna study. Countervailing duty that I mentioned earlier coming up. Protection against subsidies. Anti-dumping duties are protection against foreign dumping. Yes, coming up, all coming up. That's what I said. Oh, why? No graph here. Oh, then next chapter. Now, chapter 6. Now we're gonna see 1930s marked. If you recall that 1930s was the Great Depression. 1930s, Great Depression, that decade. So now, what and how it was? How was it? The tariff policies in the United States before 1930. U.S. trade policy marked by fluctuations. Dominant motive behind early tariff laws was to provide tax revenue. First tariff law, 1789, at that time, for revenue. Today, tariff represent less than 1% of total federal revenue. Tariff is no longer in the US for revenue. It is for protection. As revenue arguments for tariffs weakened, protective argument gained strength. The protective argument, 1791, Hamilton reports on manufacturers' proposed young industries, the infant industry, just started in the United States be granted import protection until they could grow and prosper the infant industry argument. By 1820s, protectionist sentiments in the United States, well established in northern states, opposed by the southern states. 1828, tariff of abominations, 45% duties, provoked the South, wanted low duties for its imported manufactured goods. So there's compromise tariff of 1833, reducing tariff, 1840 and 1850s Walker tariff, 23% to eliminate budget surplus. And then Civil War, that era of tariff and so on, and 1864 to pay for the Civil War. I want to show you the graph. There's a figure, nice figure. Is it coming up? Late 1800s, cheap foreign labor arguments to protect products coming from overseas, which are using the lower cost of labor overseas. So McKinley and Dingley tariffs, 1897, tariffs of 46%, and Payne Aldrich 1909. And because I want to get this smooth Holly, that's the key that we're gonna get.
Doctor, Doctor, that's your screen.
Oh, okay. So please, next time, stop me at the beginning. I don't remember that I didn't share. Okay. So when I'm speaking, no slides. So please. This is the thing about Teams. I don't know what you're saying. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So now can you see on the screen?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. So this is a chapter 6, trade regulations and industrial policies, mainly on the industrial countries, mainly on the developed countries. This chapter 6. Chapter 7 next will be on developing countries. So we want to get to this smooth Holly Act. But before that, we want to know what happened before 1930. And you must recall 1930s was the decade of Great Depression. After that Great Depression, World War II after that. So all this we're going to study, including countervailing duty that I mentioned earlier. When there's a subsidy, to correct that is using the countervailing duty and anti-dumping duties and so on. So now this is U.S. policies before 1930. First tariff law. In the beginning, tariff in the United States was for the government revenue, but today it's no longer for government revenue. Just 1%. That revenue comes from tariff. It is not for revenue today. It is for protection. So as revenue arguments for tariffs weaken, protective argument gains strength. 1791, Hamilton, this report of manufacturers proposed infant industry argument to protect newly established industries until they can grow on their own feet and can stand on their own feet. And then by 1820s, protectionist sentiments in the United States well established in northern states, but opposed by southern states. 1828, 45% duties. This provoked the South. The states wanted low duties for imported manufactured goods, and then came up with compromise tariffs, reducing tariffs. 1840 and 1850s, Walker tariffs to eliminate budget surplus. Civil War era model tariffs to pay for civil war between North and South. The Civil War in the US is between northern states and southern states. Late 1800s, cheap foreign labor argument to protect products from overseas that they claimed produced using cheap labor. So this McKinley, Dingley tariffs. So tariffs went up to 46%. That's quite high, very high. 46%. And this Payne Aldrich, 1909, this is the turning point against rising protectionism. So in 1909, that's the turning point. Before that, it was rising protectionism. More protection, higher tariffs. Until 1909, the turning point, with Underwood tariff of 1913 reduced to 27. Before it was 46, now reduced to 27. After the year 1909, that turning point. And World War I, protectionist pressure returned. Early 1920s, this is before 1930, okay? World War I, protectionist. When war, more protection. Companies demand protection. Workers demand protection. Early 1920s, scientific tariff concept. We learned previously what is scientific tariff. How much can we put the tariff, the optimal tariff? Tariff in 1922, tariff rates went up. It was 27, went up again because of World War I. And the most important is Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930. At the onset of Great Depression, when was the Great Depression? Stock market crash of 1929. After that, the whole decade, 1930s, were the Great Depression. Attention to domestically produced goods. Average tariffs raised to 53%. Sparked retaliation by 25 other trading partners of the United States to retaliate of higher tariffs. So the Smoot-Hawley law was the act of 1930, increased tariffs to 53%. So this is at the onset of the 1930s Great Depression. That law, Smoot-Hawley law. President Hoover saw it as a protectionist trap or stuck in a protectionist trap. So the next president, which is President Roosevelt, dismantled that smooth, holy law with caution. There's no graph. Oh, 1 second. I'm looking from the other book or in the textbook. Unfortunately, the the textbook provider which makes the slide does not produce this graph that I was talking. I want to show this graph. This is the one that I looked for, but there's no slide for this. Okay. I should take the picture and share that onto your Telegram. Yeah, it is in the Telegram. Everyone can look at the Telegram, the graph. I want to show you this graph that summarizes the what we're talking about. So in the Telegram, that's how I make extra effort to find it. I'm not happy with the slides being provided not having that graph. So everyone please refer to the picture that I gave you, the graph. So look at that. Okay, everyone. This is figure 6.1, which is in our chapter 6. Smoot-Hawley Protectionism and World Trade. The title of the graph. 1929 until 1933, million of dollars. This is to show that because of Smoot-Hawley protectionist law, there was a reduction in world trade. So if you begin on the left, let's take January. January from the left side and the very, very left ring, the outer ring. 1920, the outer ring. 1929 in January was 2,998 million of dollars. So the figures show the pattern of world trade from 1929 to 1933 following because of the Smoot-Hawley law or act of 1930, which raised US tariffs to an average of level of 53% other nations retaliated because the US put on tariff 53%. Other countries retaliated by having their own tariffs raised, by increasing their own import restrictions, and the volume of trade decreased as the global economy fell into the Great Depression of 1930s. So you look at that outer ring, January 1929, 2009.98 million of dollars, and January 1930, 2,739, and January is nice way of doing, you know. I'm amazed they have this idea of showing, you know, through a graph like this. January 1930 and January 1931, 1,839. January 1932, 1,206, and January 1933, 992 million dollars only. So this is because of Smoot-Hawley law. So let's go back to the slide. Sharing this again. So that Smoot-Hawley, onset of Great Depression, attention to domestic produced goods, average tariff raised to 53%, sparked retaliation by other nations, and then finally Roosevelt dismantled that Smoot-Hawley because it became a protectionist threat during that Hoover administrations. So now Roosevelt took it out. Next, there was a Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act 1934. This transferred the authority from the Congress to the President. The President tended to consider national interest in forming trade policy, led to lower tariffs and trade liberalization. Give the authority for the President to negotiate without approval from the Congress. And next is the most favored nation clause agreement between two nations to apply tariffs to each other at rates as low as those applied to any other nations having MFN status. Most favored nation. Tariff reductions made on a non-discriminatory basis. In 1998, US replaced terms the most favored nations to the normal trade relations. So now it's being called as normal trade relations. Before that, it was MFN, most favored nations, at the clause agreement that allows a special low tariff to each other at rates as low as those applied to any other nations having that most favored nation. And then this is what I talked so much about in the past. General Agreement on Tax and Trade, 1947. Agreement among member nations to decrease trade barriers, to reduce tariffs, and place on all nations on equal footing in trade relations. In 1995, WTO replaced GATT beginning January 1st, 1995, after the Marrakesh meeting in April 1993. So they decided, 1994, so they agree a new forum, which is an institution. WTO will take care of matters to trade liberalization and tariff reduction, and not only that, for what call this? I lost the word. If they complain, so WTO is the place to complain and get the settlement. Settlement. I lost the word. So there are two pillars of non-discrimination principle. So GATT and WTO is based on non-discrimination. What it says, non-discrimination here, is that if you give to a country a low tariff, you must give that low tariff to all other countries. So most favored nations principle, normal trade, national treatment principle, these are two pillars. If you're given to one country national treatment, same as treatment to your nationals, firms from your own nation, you must give that to other to countries, firms from other countries. If you give that national treatment to country A, you must give that national treatment to firms from all other countries. That's the non-discrimination principle of GATT and WTO. So this is to promote freer trade, settling trade disputes. Yes, I lost that word. To settle trade disputes. I lost the word tonight, disputes. It's already 10 p.m. So we're gonna stop soon because I don't want to drag you into very late night. Improve dispute resolution process by formulating complaint procedures, providing conciliation panel. Am I coming back again? So predictability through binding and transparency. These are the principles of GATT. Number one, non-discrimination. Number two, the principle, predictability. Through what? Binding is an agreement. Binding. You signed it. You bound by what you signed. And there's transparency. So promising not to increase tariff or to increase trade barriers as important as reducing one. Businesses had a clear view of their future opportunities. Countries required to disclose trade policies. So GATT through several rounds. So what is GATT? It is multilateral trade negotiations to reduce tariff. Many countries. Multilateral. Many ways. Country A and country B. Country A, country C. Country C and country B. Multilateral. Not just A, B, C, D. Many countries. So prior to GATT, negotiations were bilateral. With GATT, negotiations became multilateral. Kennedy round, Tokyo round, Yoga round was the last round of GATT they could not reach to agreements even at the 11th hour, which deadline, always not meeting the deadline of usually by midnight, 31st of December of that year, before the New Year's Day. The Uruguay round could not finish, could not reach an agreement, mainly because of among developed countries, not developed countries with developing countries, among developed countries. Among developed countries. You'll be surprised. What sector? Agriculture. Agriculture was the disputed area between developed countries. The US claimed that EU, through the Common Agriculture Policy, CAP of EU, Common Agriculture Policy of EU, gave subsidies to farmers. European Union countries, on the other hand, claim that US government gives subsidies also to their farmers. So the so-called fight never completed. So they argued over agriculture, and as a result, the Uruguay round did not close. Until finally they said, we agreed to disagree, and let's meet in Marrakesh, Morocco, in April 1994. When they met in Marrakesh, Morocco, 1994, they signed the final act. Not here, maybe not here. I just remember from my own. The final act embodying the results of multilateral trade negotiation. Among that, what is included in that is they agree to establish a new forum to deal with this, all this, which is World Trade Organization, WTO, to begin in on January 1st, 1995. And then this 1999 battle in Seattle. The activists went to Seattle because of this WTO. They seem to be not fair to developing countries. I mean, they're more concerned about these activists, more concerned about the dominance of developed countries against developing countries. So these so-called activists, they clashed with the police in Seattle, United States, at the time of the meeting of WTO in Seattle, Washington, United States. And the Doha round was the last round. There was a Mexican Cancun round, Singapore round. Doha round was the last round before, again, they could not reach into agreements. So there was a Doha development agenda, but could not. So now, governments conduct of trade relations among members, WTO members, bind their commitments adhere to get rules of reducing tariffs, broad and non-discrimination, and transparency, all those. Broad range of trade pacts have been negotiated under GATT and database trade measures and statistics. 164 nations, 97% of world trade based in Geneva, Switzerland, multilateral trading systems. What is new now? The difference between GATT and WTO. GATT only dealt with trade in merchandises, in goods. Let me repeat. GATT dealt only with the tariff reductions on trade of merchandise. Merchandise trade only. What is merchandise? Goods only. But WTO, not only goods or merchandise, same thing, goods, merchandise. Not only trade in goods, but included in the WTO, this is new. Services, trade in services also is dealt by WTO. So the new thing with WTO is services, trade in services included. Number 2 and number 3. This did not exist with GATT. Trade in services, no. GATT didn't have it. Intellectual property protections, GATT didn't have it. Now WTO has it. Intellectual property, protection of trademarks, protection against copying, counterfeited good. You know, Rolex. You can buy Rolex in Chinatown, Kuala Lumpur. Of course, not made in Malaysia. So that's counterfeited good. What happened with this intellectual property protection? Why it is so important? Because if there's no protection, innovation will not occur. Engineers, scientists, R&D takes so much money, energy, and expertise to do R&D and to come up with products, and then your product being copied. So if this is the case, that will reduce the incentives, will stop innovation, will stop R&D. So very important to have intellectual property rights protected. And the third thing, which is new with WTO, is investment. In the past, GATT did not deal with investment, which is investment liberalization. To enable companies from another country to invest in another country. So also deals with investment. So administers a unified package of agreements to which all members are committed, watchdog of international trade, to oversee, to look over, oversee, look over, watch the running of international trade, and also the same function as before with regard to GATT is a dispute settlement. You know, complain to the WTO, and if you win, if that country wins, the other country must pay. Or being slapped with, can be slapped with the tariff by the other country. So WTO is not a government, but it is an institution. Yes. Now, what is different? What is the difference between GATT and WTO? Those are the three differences. You know what they cover: services, intellectual property, investment. In terms of the nature, in terms of the person, when I say person, GATT as a person, WTO as a person, just for the sake of me telling you, GATT was not an institution. GATT was not an institution. GATT was only an agreement. At that time, not in the note here, It was proposed ITO, International Trade Organization, was proposed, but was not. ITO never materialized, never happened, because U.S. Congress did not ratify it. Wasn't ratified by United States Congress, so that ITO never materialized. As a result, an agreement at that time, this I'm talking about 1947, an agreement at the time an existing agreement at that time became a de facto organization for trade liberalization. So ITO never materialized. GATT already existed. So GATT became a de facto by default. Yes. GATT by default. Take out de facto. GATT by default became the so-called body. It's not a body, it's an agreement for trade liberalization, because ITO did not materialize. And GATT ended in 1993, replaced by WTO. Now, the difference. GATT was never an institution. GATT was only an agreement. But WTO is an institution. That's the difference between GATT and WTO as far as the nature of the person. If you think of it as a person, the GATT as a person, no, not institution, only agreement. WTO as a person, so-called person, quote unquote, is an institution, not a government. It's an institution. Individual nations free to set own appropriate levels of environmental, labor, health, and safety protections. Overseas implementation of tariff cuts and reduction of non-tariff barriers. Reverses policies of protection in certain sensitive areas. Settles trade dispute. Major objective of the WTO is to strengthen GATT mechanism for settling trade dispute through consultation, dispute panel, and appeal body, and giving the retaliatory tariffs to countries being injured because of dumping, for example, or countervailing duty in the case of subsidies. Does the WTO reduce national sovereignty? Critics say yes, WTO settles dispute, not the US. So US so-called lost that sovereignty to WTO. Supporters, no. Decision of WTO dispute panel cannot force United States to change US laws. The specific obligations WTO imposes greater or less than the benefits United States receives? Does the WTO harm the environment? Two arguments that trade liberalization harms the environment. That trade liberalization fosters race to the bottom in environmental standard. What is race to the bottom? Because of environmental regulations, companies will go and find countries which will have lower sets of regulations when it comes to environmental protection, and go there and manufacture the products there. For example, if the environmental laws in the United States so stringent, in the UK so stringent, US companies or European companies will find countries like Vietnam, countries like Vietnam. I wanted to say Papua New Guinea. No, because other considerations. You want to see the profitability, to be the suitability of the the place for factories, going to Vietnam, because Vietnamese laws when it comes to environmental protection is more relaxed, and so the cost of producing products in Vietnam is cheaper. If you go to countries that has stringent environmental laws, you have to buy this, to install this machine, that machine in your factory to reduce smoke, everything, and so that cost more for your products. So race to the bottom. Companies will go to countries where environmental laws are more relaxed, not stringent. So trade liberalization encourages some practices that are unacceptable to some people. Example, catching dolphins in tuna nets. Does trade liberalization improve the environment? Trade stimulates economic growth. Demand for cleaner environment, tougher environmental laws. Trade and growth lead to development and dissemination of environmentally friendly production techniques. The future of WTO. So we're gonna stop at this WTO thing because way over the time. So the future of the WTO, major barrier to multilateral trade deals is evolving balance of world economic power. Brazil, Russia, India, China, the so-called BRICS, see themselves as poor enough, need to have protection. Rich countries consider BRICS as major competitors. There was in the news that BRICS consider not using US dollar, and how that's possible. We're going to discuss that in the second part of the book of this course when we deal with the financial aspects. So trade liberalization proceeds along two tracks. With trade, attempt to enforce environmental, labor, and intellectual property protection. This is favored by the United States. Emphasizes decreasing tariffs outside sensitive areas. This is favored by China. Not IP, nothing to do with labor, nothing to do with environment. This is favored by China. But the US has always like to tie the issue, the trade opening or tariff and things with environment, labor, intellectual property, and so on. So we have to stop right here. More graph there. Next, coming up in next class, the anti-dumping duty that we talk about is a remedy. One slide, two slide, three slide, four slide, five slide. Because next Tuesday I will attend the convocation, so I can only do the class for 1 hour and a half only, from 11 to 12 or 12:30. So really time is so limited. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One, two, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Okay, let's do a few slides. Next is a Trade Promotion Authority Fast Track Authority. Trade Promotion Authority Fast Track granted to the President. President actively consults with Congress and private sector throughout negotiations. When negotiations complete, outcome subject to up or down vote only, without amendment in both houses of Congress and Senate within 90 days. Fast Track Authority instrumental to major trade agreements. This fast track gives the President the authority to negotiate and becomes a law with the vote within 90 days. If no, becomes automatically a law. But efforts to renew face stiff opposition. In addition to remedial rules, unfair trade practices, US has trade remedy laws using the escape clause in the agreement, which is temporary safeguards. President may terminate trade or modify agreement to prevent injury to US firms, initiated by petition from American industry to the US International Trade Commissions, which investigates and recommends and responds to the President. So trade remedy laws, fair trade escape laws, increasing import focus, criteria for action, increasing imports are substantial cost of injury response, duties, quota, tariff rate, quotas, orderly marketing arrangement, adjustment assistance, subsidized imports. This is when subsidy, the name of it is countervailing duty. Manufacturing, production, export subsidies, material injury, yes, and threat to material injury, so duties. The response is duties. Dumping, anti-dumping duty. This is the difference. Dumping, anti-dumping duty, subsidies, countervailing duty. Imports so below cost or below price. We learned that tonight. Material injury is the criteria when there is material injury. Yes, duties to the other countries. Unfair trade, Section 301 of the United States. Foreign practices violating the trade agreements or injuries to the US trades, unjustifiable, unreasonable, or discriminatory practices burdensome to US commerce, all appropriate and feasible action. This Super 301. It is known in magazine and newspaper as Super 301 because the United States is so powerful, can apply their own law, which is Section 301 in the United States, to other countries. So in the writing, in the magazine, Super 301. US safeguards limit surging imports of textile from China. Yes. When it comes to textile, there's another separate agreement, binding, multi-fiber agreement. This agreement for textile products, restricted competition from developing exporting countries with low cost of labor to industrial relations. So negotiated each year on per country basis. Now, when it comes to subsidies, the opposite is countervailing duty. WTO views export subsidies as unfair. Importing countries can therefore retaliate by levying countervailing duty, limited to amount of the foreign export subsidies. Objective is to increase price of imported goods to its fair market value. To counter against subsidies, which is the price is cheaper because of subsidies. So by that amount of subsidies. Now, anti-dumping duty. Rather than seek countervailing duties, United States firms have recently found it easier to convince U.S. government to impose anti-dumping duties. To convince U.S. government that they're being injured materially. So offsets export sales in the United States at prices below average total cost of production, and price discrimination where foreign firms sell in the U.S. at price less than your own country, to offset that. So investigations are done to find the evidence of dumping, to find the evidence of material injury, and link between the dumped imports and the alleged injury. Remedies against dumped and subsidized imports. Direct effect of dumping and subsidizing imports is to lower prices. Because of dumping, prices is lower. So it's unfair competition. So producing benefits and costs for the importing countries benefits consumers actually. When the price is cheaper, benefit consumers if imports are finished goods and consuming industries that use imports as intermediate inputs, which is downstream industry. Imposes cost on import competing industry. This dumping, subsidies from foreign countries will impose higher cost on the import competing industry and its workers and other domestic industries selling intermediate inputs of the import competing industry. So this upstream. Upstream means raw and not yet processed. The more processed that stages of production, we call it downstream. The more finished the products, the more downstream. Upstream, raw; downstream, more finished. So benefits the consumers actually. Dumping at prices below fair market values and subsidizing export are unfair trade practices under international trade law, can be neutralized